Politics, I think the people gathered here well know, is to act as a bridge between practical politics and academia. And a cornerstone of this effort is our Fellows Program, which brings political and public service professionals to Harvard each and every semester for exactly that purpose. People who have the experience in these areas that we feel our students and our community can benefit from. This is something this institute has been doing now for 40 years. Of this semester's 6 outstanding fellows, we have assembled a panel of 4 who specialize and have been especially focused this semester on the American political process. And the topic that they and you will be discussing tonight is Election 2008, the campaign, the transition, and the Obama administration. To my immediate left is Governor Tom Vilsack. Governor Vilsack served as the governor of Iowa from 1998 to 2006. He was the first Democrat elected to that particular position in 32 years. Governor Vilsack kept his commitment to serve only 2 terms and actually was the first declared candidate for the United States presidency in the Democratic Party until announcing his withdrawal from the race in February of 2007. Currently, Governor Vilsack is of counsel to the Dorsey Trial Group, focuses on strategic counseling and advising clients in the fields of energy conservation, renewable energy, and agribusiness development. This semester, he's been advising our students on the subject that we are discussing tonight. Nico Mele is the founder and president of Echo Ditto, a leading internet strategy consulting company whose clients include the Clinton Foundation and the United Nations World Food Program. One of Echo Ditto's first clients was a then little-known state senator in the state of Illinois named Barack Obama, who was running for a seat in the U.S. Senate. Before starting Echo Ditto, Nico served as the Internet Operations Director of Governor Howard Dean's presidential primary campaign in 2003. Next to Nico is Jennifer Donahue. She is the political director at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics. Previously, Jennifer spent 14 years as a political reporter, analyst, and producer. During the 2008 and 2004 New Hampshire primary races, Jennifer appeared frequently on ABC World News Tonight, Nightline, CBS Evening News, NBC Nightly News, MSNBC's Hardball, CNN's Anderson Cooper 360. The list is actually very long. And finally, here tonight is Alex Castellanos, who we have all come to know and respect. Now, that's true. You may disagree with everything else I say, but we've all come to know and respect Alex for his analysis of the presidential campaign on CNN. He is one of the Republican Party's best-known and most successful media consultants and strategists. Alex has served as a media consultant to 7 U.S. presidential campaigns and has been credited with the discovery of the political soccer mom. He's also known as the father of the attack ad. How you can do both of those things may or may not be revealed during the first part of this particular session, but you will have the opportunity at the end, as always, to ask questions. And if it all hasn't been made clear to you by then, you'll have plenty of time to inquire. This past Sunday, from the pulpit of the Memorial Church here in the Harvard Yard, the Reverend Professor Peter Gomes, in a brief comment, his entire comment nearly, on the events of the past week in America said, and I quote, "It is always good to see our graduates do well." It occurred to us here at the Institute of Politics that there might be more to say on this particular subject, and so tonight we have a set of questions that I will pose, and then again, from the 4 mics here, we will turn to the audience about halfway through the program. So to the 4 panelists tonight. Let's start with the straightforward and basic question. Does this newly elected president, Barack Obama, will the president-elect have a mandate for his service as our president? Tom Vilsack.
Well, I would say that he does, given the extent of his electoral victory in all parts of the country. The first Democratic candidate to get more than 50% of the vote since Jimmy Carter, and I think arguably Jimmy Carter, because of Watergate, might have been an anomaly. So in a sense, the first one to have a significant victory in that sense since Lyndon Johnson. I think he has a mandate for change. I think he has a mandate for change generally in areas involving domestic policy and America's place in the world. I'm not sure that he necessarily has a mandate for the specifics of the change. And so I think you have to be careful in terms of how you characterize the mandate. But I think a vast majority of people who voted for the president-elect did so because they wanted a different direction for the country. And that would suggest that that constitutes a mandate for change.
Nico?
Ditto.
Echo ditto.
Echo. Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely, it was definitely a significant vote there for Obama. I think how much of a mandate we'll have to see. I feel like the turnout was less than expected and projected. That in a number of states, pretty conservative ballot propositions passed by the same voters who overwhelmingly elected Obama. A number of the Senate and House races, I think, are much closer, and there were a few more Republican victories than originally anticipated. There's no doubt that there was a definitive, the country chose Obama, but I think the mandate is a little, lot remains to be seen.
I think that President-elect Obama has a mandate to carry us into this century of politics. I think he campaigned very clearly on the idea of changing the way we do politics in this country. And I think that he has a mandate to try to put the economy back on track. I think that he himself and his transition team have shown an awareness that they do not have a mandate on more than a few issues. That they probably have a mandate on the economy and maybe 2 other issues. And that if they were to overreach, they would be overreaching the definition of what the country gave him. He won both the Electoral College overwhelmingly. He won the popular vote by a very, very healthy margin, something we haven't seen since last century. But I will point out that despite the fact that he won overwhelmingly, as the press seemed to dub it, sweepingly was the word that they chose. Not landslide, not narrowly, but sweepingly. I'll point out that young people went 3-1 for Obama. White men were tied in how they voted, between 1 point, 48 and 49. And white women actually voted more for McCain than for Obama. So I wouldn't call it a mandate because I think that Obama has defined his goal as representing everybody for them. And that in itself is a mandate to give something to them, not to govern in and of himself.
Gee, there's the advantage of going last year is you can just agree with everybody. It's a strange mandate if it is one. I think Nico pointed out the ideological composition of the electorate has not changed. This country is still about twice as conservative, right of center, as it is left of center, liberal. And yet we have just elected our most left of center president that we've known in modern times. Does he have a mandate on issues? Well, the incoming administration is debating what to do first, implying that they don't seem to feel compelled to do any one specific thing or another. They think they have some running room. And as a matter of fact, whether they choose to tackle energy or health care first, whether they roll this up into one big bang approach, we can talk about as we go forward. But they seem to feel they have some running room. I do think their mandate, though, this was an election about big things and not small things. And in that, there is a mandate. One, I think, as Jennifer noted, to transcend the old politics. And I think the age of phony political outrage is over, at least for a few weeks. Maybe, with any luck, for a little longer. But there certainly is a new seriousness. And if he does not have a mandate, why are you seeing even Republican partisans back off a little bit right now and give the Obama administration some running room to start with? You are. I think, and the reason is because the mandate is compelled not so much by what he's achieved, but by what is needed. And right now, that is a lot of this country is on fire, and we need to do something big about it. So, is there a mandate? I think if there is a mandate, it's for a comprehensive economic growth package. And whether that includes energy or health care, I think that's one of the things we'll see coming first.
One of the things that each of you has touched on, at least, as you think about the way in which the vote broke down across the whole big country, is the fact that while we could argue about this word mandate and the size and compare it to other presidential elections, and many people will do just that for many years to come here at Harvard and at campuses all across this country. When a new president moves forward, it is normally anticipated that some effort should be taken to attempt to bring those people together, especially those who did not agree, either voted for their opponent or in some cases simply did not participate in the election. What advice would you give to the president-elect? And what do you think this new president-elect should do to attempt to bring people together if, as you at least suggest, that would be an important way to begin?
I think he's got a tremendous opportunity that very few presidents have had. Nothing unites the people of Earth like a threat from Mars. And right now we have the threat from Mars. This is the, we're looking at an economic meltdown. And so I think on that he's got a tremendous, hey, that's the good news. But a couple of things that might be worth bearing in mind as he goes forward. They're talking about whether to do a small economic stimulus package, something address the economic meltdown separately, or whether, quote, the big bang, roll some things together. Is this his opportunity to get the long-desired list of large reforms, health care, economy, et cetera, to get all that, roll it all together and get it done? I think if he takes on health care right at the start with, health care is, we've been conditioned to look at it as a partisan issue. So if he rolls that into his first package, Republicans will go to their corner, Democrats will go to their corner, and you will kind of restore the worst habits of both. But if you start looking at an economic growth package and meld energy into that, it's probably the one thing you'd find Republican support. Obama would make a lot of his supporters happy, especially the younger voters. We're not conditioned to look at it as partisanly as older issues. And, it's an interesting thing. There's a generational change here. If you ask Democrats of old, whether it's the Kennedy generation or Carter generation or even the Clinton generation, what's the one thing, if you could do, that you'd do to reform in this country? They'd probably say health care. I'm not sure that would be the case in the Obama world, in this generation. I think it might be energy. We may have moved on here. And so I think starting with something that gives you a chance to unite folks, rolling everything together into a big economic reform thing. But I think the biggest thing he can do is not start to litigate partisanship. This is not, how do you bring everybody together? Well, you don't do it by sitting down at a table and negotiating it. You instead turn people forward and say, we're all going to go over here. And this candidate's great gift has always been not to sit down across the table, which by definition there's one side and there's another, but to say, we're going to go somewhere else. There's something better over the horizon. And I think that great gift of vision is the way he keeps this country, takes care of some of the partisanship and keeps the country moving forward.
Jennifer?
It's interesting. I think, first of all, that Obama's team has demonstrated that they understand where the electorate is on different issues. That his campaign demonstrated that as it went forward, as the economic crisis unfolded, almost everything that they said and did was in the context of the economic crisis. So they did let healthcare fall off as an issue. That was, I think, a decision that they made, that they weren't going to focus on universal health care at a time where people were worried about anything that would send their spending up, at a time when McCain was positioning himself as the tax cutter and Obama as the tax raiser, tax hiker. I think they understand that loud and clear. And Should they not, they know that 2010 is breathing down their neck, and that there was a holding on of Democratic power and a consolidation of it, with all three branches now being held by the Democrats. But it's not very often that you keep that kind of power for very long, and they know it better than anyone. So I think that, you know, if they want to add to the 57 Senate seats, if they want to add to the House gains, they're going to have to keep their eye on that map. They're going to have to look at the Senate and the House and try not to lose seats. That means Obama really can't go left. He's got no choice if he wants to keep this governing coalition. He has to stay middle. And I hear a lot about we're a center-right country. I think that's a completely meaningless statement. We're a country of individuals that in recent decades has seen movement towards a more right-leaning electoral vote. I don't think that it means anything about the American people. They tend to speak and politicians listen, and then they respond or don't, and then they get reelected or not. So I think the extent to which Obama can govern in the middle, which I think is what the electorate has clearly asked for, is the extent to which Democrats keep those seats in 2010 and then potentially get Obama reelected in 2012. And that, to me, is the way that a party consolidates, unifies, and grows gains in an aggregative way.
Nico, I want to skip over you and come back to you if I could. Governor Vilsack.
Well, this is a fascinating conversation because I was just thinking back to my own circumstance as a governor. That first year is a very important year for getting things done. The second year, you've got members of Congress concerned about their own political futures. The third year, you begin to focus on your own reelection effort, and the fourth year, you're fully engaged in that reelection effort. And if you are fortunate enough to get reelected, then you have the fifth and sixth year to get something done, and then seventh and eighth year, you are fading out of existence. So I think it's important and necessary. The expectation on the part of many people who supported the president-elect was that he would in fact do something on health care, and that he would do something on energy, and he would do something on the economy. So I wouldn't be surprised, notwithstanding the challenges and risks that you take in wrapping health care into a major initiative, that he wouldn't try to use this crisis situation to transcend those traditional barriers on health care. What he proposed in health care was more of a market orientation than others who have suggested more of a government run and a government program. So he might be able to wrap it into an economic stimulus, wrap it into a new 21st century American economy that has to address this. You can't have an economy that spends 16 to 20% of its GDP on health care and be competitive. So you've got to respond to that, and he's only going to have a short period of time to do that. So I think the way you essentially reach out to folks is that you clearly have people in your inner circle, your cabinet, in your advisors and so forth who can relate, communicate, and deal with folks on the other side. You make, as he has, outreach to John McCain and see if you can get Senator McCain and the kind of national spirit that he has and concern he has about the country involved. And then I think you go out and you sell your program hard, which I think in the past we've not been particularly successful at doing. Sell your program hard to the people out there, and basically create a sense that if you're either going to be on the train or you're not, and if you're not on the train, you're not going to be successful electorally. I think that's the way that you create a consensus, not among the politicians in Washington, but a consensus among people in the United States. And the last thing I would say is, he said something very interesting in the speech that he gave at Grant Park. And I don't know if folks noticed this or not, but there was in my view anyway, a different Barack Obama when he took the stage for his speech in Grant Park than it was prior to that. It was an individual who realized that the weight of the world now rested on his shoulders. And while he was happy to have won, he recognized the gravity of the circumstance. And what he essentially said was, we all are going to be asked to do something here. We all are going to be part of the solution. And he is going to call upon us to do things differently than we've done. You are not going to have an energy policy or a healthcare policy that doesn't demand more of the American public than what we have today. And so one way that you create that sense of unity is that you give people a sense that we are in this together and we are all going to contribute. in some way, large and small. And I think one of the challenges will be, how do you convey that to the American public, and how do you get them convinced that it's in their best interest to do what's right in healthcare and prevention and wellness, what's right in energy conservation and efficiency.
Nico, there was a story in the Washington Post today. The headline was, "Under Obama, web would be the way." And basically, in the story, they recount the total amount of data that this president-elect has accumulated, more than 10 million names in a database. 3 million plus of those are contributors. And the story is focused in large measure on the fact that no such collection of names and information has ever occurred before in the political world. How does that help bring people together, and what do you do if web is the way to reach out to the other names that aren't on that list?
Well, when Governor Vilsack talks about selling your plan, right, selling your agenda, Obama built an incredible national infrastructure by combining the internet and his field operations, and that infrastructure persists after he's elected. And I fully imagine he's going to figure out how to use that to ask people to do their part and to help bring about his agenda. You can, on the day after he was elected, he launched change.gov, which is a clear, it's a fairly simple website, but it was a clear message. It was meant to set a tone that the internet has a central and critical role in this in this coming administration.
But that number is a big number, but it's not the group of people that were for his opponent. How does he broaden that out? Does he use that list, that technology, to move beyond the existing list, and if so, how?
I mean, I actually think it would be a mistake. The Washington Post article talked about how that list could be used to kind of grow a Democratic majority, and I think it'd be a mistake if it was used exclusively for that. It's really an opportunity to kind of reach across the divide, to use, the internet is a tremendously collaborative, engaging medium where a lot of different communities can participate and get involved. And I think that I totally believe in this administration's, or the coming administration's ability and commitment to make that happen. That's how they beat Hillary and then McCain to a large extent. And so clearly, I think they're going to take those lessons into government with them.
Well, we're going to focus on the future. That's the primary thing that brings us together. But I think, based on your attention briefly to the past, it might be worth at least reflecting on Senator McCain and his campaign. And Alex, let me ask you, if you would, to talk a little bit about that campaign. And I guess the specific question would be, did John McCain fail as a candidate, or is this really all about the victor and what he brought to the race?
I checked again this morning and we still lost. So I guess something failed. That's pretty fair estimate. When we started this thing, and I was working for Mitt Romney a couple of years ago, I was actually just looking at some of the material, and it was November of '06 when we started talking about this stuff. I remember I mentioned to Governor Romney that I thought he would end up running against Barack Obama. I was only half right, because this election was an election about big things and where America was going. Who were we and where were we going? This is an election about a new frontier, election about moving into the future. And Obama, almost at times without saying a word, addressed that, just generationally. John McCain has many great strengths. Keeping the country safe, a man of honor and integrity, lots of things. But the future is not one of the things you would ordinarily think that someone who's had this particular journey in life, that you would call on him to lead the country there at this point. So did we fail? I say if we failed in one thing, it was not, I don't think it's fair to ask McCain to be someone he's not. You're not going to ask him to be 40 years old. You're not going to ask him to be the visionary. I do think he could have run a better campaign about how to get to the future, at least a transitional campaign, and about the economy. And I think in the spring, from spring to when Obama got the nomination, wrestled it away from Hillary, there was a window there of 3 or 4 months that the McCain campaign could have used to take some turf. And again, I don't think he could have said, follow me into the future, but I do think he could have said, look, I'm not an economist. I don't even play one on TV. But I do know something about the world, and I know something about strength and America's strength. And right now, when we look at what we're competing with out there in the world and the strength we need to have to ensure our prosperity and security comes from a strong economy. We've got to compete and win in this new global economic frontier. And as president, I'm going to get up every day and I'm going to put both feet on the floor and I'm going to concentrate on strengthening this economy. And that means one thing. Not that we're going to make Washington's economy stronger, we're going to make yours. You have to be the most successful American in history. You've got to have a bigger paycheck. You've got to have, a more successful business. You're a woman, you're starting most small businesses in this country. You've got to be successful, not for your own benefit, but to lift this country so we can compete with the world and remain strong. I think that kind of message in the early part of the campaign and a different vice presidential pick might have led him a little closer. Look, when he came out of the convention, this thing was still close. I mean, McCain was even up a point or two in some surveys. All that is to say, it takes a lot to elect a Democrat president in the United States of America. We had, unpopular president, unpopular war. We had gas at $5, housing bubbles exploding, economic, what more do you want? Have to hold a gun to people's head to vote for a Democrat for president? And that still wasn't enough. Then you have a Barack Obama who has to move toward the center, which he did in a center-right country. In a center-right country. He had to, tax cut for 95% of Americans. That's something you used to hear Republicans talk about. Oil drilling may be okay. I'll keep Gates and Paulson maybe. You've seen Obama move toward the middle quite a bit. So I think long answer.
One did what you do in a general election and the other didn't.
Well, as interesting as it would be actually to finish this particular discussion about whether we're in the middle, let me just, Jennifer, ask you, because the issue is now before us, as to the vice presidency or the candidates that were selected by each of the parties, Professor Roger Porter here on this campus would say statistically in the last 100 years, the only real effect of the choice of the vice presidential candidate is to move the vote in the state from which the candidate comes. We don't have to be a professor here to know that the vote in Alaska and Delaware were not going to make the difference in this particular election. So I guess from your perspective, why did they make the choices that they make, and what effect do you believe the choice had on either of the campaigns?
Well, I think that it did have a big effect this cycle. There were a lot of firsts in this cycle. One was that negative campaigning didn't work. Attack ads didn't work.
Someone please explain that to John McCain?
Yes, I think we've explained it to John McCain now.
He's
It took a vote, but I think he gets it. I think in reality, this is the first cycle where negative ads didn't work. And Obama, I'm sorry.
The guy who did the most of them won. I'll just point.
Oh, boy.
And the best ones, by the way.
I honestly thought the reason you were on that end and I was on this end is that we had to be kept apart. But apparently not.
Okay.
That was the idea.
I'll be simple.
Well, we can readjust if you all, but on the vice presidency.
Back to the vice presidency. Okay, when McCain chose Sarah Palin, his problem was not the selection of Sarah Palin so much as, I saw your eyebrows go up, Tom, as it was that he had already had his gimmick shots used up. You get a few gimmicks as a candidate that people give you a pass on. But he had already used them up. He had said the fundamentals of the economy were strong. That was a mistake. That was his mistake, okay? That was it. He got a pass on that from the media. Then he went out and suspended his campaign. He did a lot of things that were wrong, that seemed impulsive, seemed erratic, as they were named in such a negative fashion by his opponent. But that was a fair assessment of how he was acting from a strategic point of view. These were not things in his interest. They were things that reflected that he was being overhandled by people who wanted him to play a certain role, and that role was out of the playbook of the last 2 cycles and the 2 cycles before that. They were not out of the current 2008 playbook, which we now see was the Obama campaign manual. I think McCain could have basically been anybody and lost. I think that, I mean, historically, it's a 1 in 5 chance of winning a 3rd term for a party. That's a 20% chance. What are the odds, in all honesty, that a 72-year-old centrist who, his own party doesn't really like, is going to be the guy that gets enough energy on the right, keeps the middle, and then grabs that extra little bit to actually be president? The odds are almost non-existent. And so realistically, I don't think McCain was a good candidate. No, I don't. I've seen a much better campaign run by John McCain. In 2000, I've seen him perform at a level that's about 10 times as high as he performed this campaign. And I think that that was surprising to friend and foe alike. But could he have won if he had done a better job? I really don't believe so. I think that choosing Sarah Palin for a lot of voters was the clincher. Because I think for female voters, despite the initial bit of euphoria that people felt that he had selected a female, surprised the pundits, all the fun parlor games. After the shock over the parlor games was over, I think people realized he had really chosen someone who most people within and outside his party felt was unqualified. And then I think she demonstrated that in the media. And I'm not making a value judgment about her intelligence or her politics. I am making a value judgment about McCain as a person and whether that was a consistent decision for him. And I think people overwhelmingly said, no, that's a great sign of inconsistency, and you've just made me incredibly uncomfortable with the idea of you being president.
Governor, not necessarily as the tiebreaker in this, but you've watched campaigns for some time. I mean, do you think that the nature of the ads was different? Do you think the negative and the positive ads were distinguishable from previous campaigns? Do you think, in fact, that people respond in the same way as they did in the early days when the first major negative campaign ads were hitting? Or did it matter in this election?
I think it only mattered. I wasn't, there's no one ad that sticks out in this race, at least for me. The concern I had about McCain's ads, it seemed like it was a different issue every week. There wasn't a consistent theme to them. And so one week it was, we've got a socialist running. The next week it was inexperience and a lack of judgment. Obama's ads had a consistency about them, which was A, I'm the change candidate, and B, this guy doesn't know much about the economy, and we're in a mess, and we need somebody who does know something about the economy. That seemed to be so it reinforced Obama's message. And I think they did a great job of controlling the earned and the free media. It seemed to me that Obama's activities were much more thematic, much more consistent, and much more disciplined. And one of the things I noticed in 2000 when President Bush ran his successful campaign, thanks to the court, he was very disciplined. His team was disciplined. And I saw that same sense of discipline in the Obama campaign, which I did not see in the McCain campaign. And I think that is an underappreciated aspect of any campaign, is the ability to maintain discipline, to have a strategic plan, to think about it, and to stick with it, and to have faith in it.
Well, we're just about to go to the floor for questions, so prepare yourself for that. But Alex, on this issue of the positive campaigning and the approach that was taken with these ads, and I think the governor presented a fairly coherent view of that. Tell me, first, do you agree, I guess, with the governor's analysis? And what did you think at the end about the decision of the president-elect and his team to take 30 minutes of national primetime news in the middle of a pretty critical week for other purposes, lock that in, and then move forward? Would you have recommended it? Do you think it worked for him?
with the last part first. You know, Obama took some big gambles in this campaign. The big speech at the convention, at the there going to the forum. You know, big shoes, and he filled them. He the 30-minute show, huge gamble, and again bought big shoes and filled them. Most political advisors probably told him not to do that because you're going to have tremendous amount. You know, young, inexperienced guy, first time running for president. Yeah, the speech on race, huge gamble. Again, things that didn't work for him, I thought, with the European trip was one of the weaker moments. Again, a big gamble that didn't quite pay off. But no, I thought that was absolutely one of the, you know, put the period at the end of the sentence. Part of the way we get to know our presidents to be is we see them tested in campaigns during tough moments like Reverend Reich. That told us about his character. Oh, this is how this man would react when the unexpected confronts him as president. He's willing to do big things and meet those tests. So yeah, I thought we learned a lot about him in those things, not in so much as what they were, as in his ability to pull them off competently. As far as the discipline of the campaign, I thought that the Obama's discipline in the campaign was relentless and ruthless and incredibly effective. Yeah, it was brutal and courageous. Most campaigns, you know, when you're in a tight race with Hillary Clinton, you waver. You get good ideas. People have lots of good ideas. They go up to, try this. And you get weak and you absolutely reach for it. And they didn't. And they are to be commended because they were not only disciplined, they were courageous to be so disciplined. But a story. We'll leave the names out for the purposes here of my political survival. When the Britney Spears ad, Paris Hilton ad came out from the McCain campaign, I got a phone call from one of the McCain higher-ups who said, don't you know why we're doing it? I kind of objected to it and said, look, I'm not sure that that's what you need to be doing right now. Their response was, don't you understand we have to disqualify Barack Obama? It's change, year of change. He's the change guy. You know, unless something's done about that, Republicans will lose, McCain will lose. I absolutely understand that. But, you know, true fact, he's the first product on the shelf. But, you know, they've got a campaign too. They're not just going to sit there and watch you disqualify them. Chances are that with a lot of money, which they seem to have, they're going to run a campaign as well, and they're going to disqualify John McCain. And there are three ways to do that. One, Republican Bush. Yell that for about $500 million worth in this kind of environment and see what happens. Two, the dark side of Maverick. You know, we tested that early even in the Romney campaign. And you don't have to explain that to people. They kind of already knew. Maverick, you know that Maverick, he sure is a Maverick. That John McCain, you just never know what he'll do. What? And then the other thing is honor and integrity, because that's McCain's core. And if they ever get to that, make him just another politician who's self-interested, you have a real problem. And all those things, then you'll have an election where the Dems will run a very negative campaigns, negative ads. I thought did work this year, worked very well. Obama was able to keep the spotlight on McCain and Bush, on erratic McCain leadership, and even go after McCain as ambitious politician. I thought very effectively. So Republicans will go after Obama, Democrats will go after McCain. We'll be right back at the starting line where we were with a 10-point generic Democratic advantage this year. Great. What does John McCain need? He needs a reason to run for president. Why is he running? And that was the one omission, I thought. Obama people had a reason. You know, there's something better here. Change. We're going to move this country into the future. McCain had a great story about himself, but he never created a great narrative about the country and where we're going. And I'm not sure that was within his ability. He's a soldier. He's not the next-gen guy.
If CNN would let him talk more, he'd do even better. Now we're going to go to questions from the audience. We're going to take them from these 4 microphones here as a hallmark of programs here in the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. Always There will be questions, and these questions, beyond being some of the brightest, most incisive, most serious, and most inspiring questions asked anywhere on the face of the earth, will be questions with a question mark at the end, and they will include only one question. And because you seem to recognize that best of all, let's start right over here.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Purcell and the panel for being here. And while, Ms. Donahue, you're against the attack ads, I feel like you might be very good at crafting them. I get that sense. Now, I have a question for Alex. I'd like to know, where does the Republican Party go from here? How do they reshape their image in a way that attracts voters in this new era? Thanks.
Well, a lot of folks are noodling on that one right now. We've just about burned the house down to the ground, so I guess we could build anything we want. There's a site, what's the name of that website? Rebuildtheparty.com. This weekend, I don't even know what happened. This weekend, allegedly, there was some conference of the old bulls. You know, all the old conservative wing of the party got together in Washington, and the rite of purification began, where everybody gets together and goes, no, I'm the purest conservative. No, I'm the purest conservative. And eventually the purest one will be the one that no one supports. And we'll go through some of that. But it's interesting what's really going on with some of the younger generation. They didn't go to the kind of worthless old meeting. They're organizing online. And it's, I think what you're going to see are people who a race to the bottom on both political parties. You thought politics could get any lower than it already is, but no, the race to the bottom is something else. Bottom-up leadership. Obama talked about it in the Democratic Party. Republicans are talking about it too. We think, you know, Republicans think we're generally the party of distributed power. We're the party that's supposed to be, you know, individual liberty. Don't concentrate power at the top. Let people make their own decisions. Trust people to run their own lives, to self-organize in communities, churches, you know, whatever other institution. There are other ways of governing ourselves other than sending all our money to Washington and hope trickle-down government sends some of it back. That's a very bottom-up approach. You know, we could, I think we're going to organize under the banner of organic conservatism, a more natural way of governing. I think you'll see that. And I think you're going to see Democrats do the same thing. Obama's got a real challenge. You know, the stuff he has talked about, we mentioned this the other night, I didn't know about this. Nico has educated me about open source versus Microsoft. And I mentioned this on CNN, and all of a sudden I woke up the wonk world on about this part of it. But Nico instructed me about the seminal essay in computer software architecture is the cathedral versus the bazaar. And the cathedral is Microsoft's way of building software. We will build it. You will like it. And you will do it, you know, you will worship in our church. Open source movement is people get together all over the world and just kind of start self-organizing and you know, you do a couple of releases of your whatever you've improved that day and people kind of bring together, and it's a very bottom-up way of governing. Is Obama going to be that guy he spoke of, leadership from the bottom up? Change begins at the bottom. I think he could be. I hope he is. I think, but we're both going to compete for the same, I think, a different way of governing than the old top-down, send all your money to Washington.
I would just say one thing, which is that what I love about politics is how completely unpredictable it is, right? And after the Democrats' losses in 2000 and 2004, there was a lot of soul searching about, you know, in 2004, just 4 years ago, you heard people talking about Karl Rove and the permanent Republican majority in this country, right? And Democrats were despairing about how we'd never be a power again, right? And so when I read about this retreat this weekend of all these conservatives to rethink the Republican Party, I mean, I remember there was one of these retreats in 2004, right after the election the Democrats had, where they were going to go and figure out the future of the Democratic Party. And I guarantee you that nobody at that retreat was in any way involved in the Obama campaign initially. And Obama certainly wasn't at that retreat. And you know, when 4 years ago we were talking about a permanent Republican majority, and now we're talking about Obama's mandate, that is the absolutely most beautiful and fantastic thing about American politics. So who knows, right? Let's go over here. Over here.
Hi, my name is Antonio Copete. I'm from the physics department in the School of Arts and Sciences. Well, one of the things I saw throughout this campaign was the criticism to both candidates, both Obama and McCain, that since they were senators, they had no executive experience. And I have been wondering throughout the campaign also, is it fair to say that the way they run a campaign tells something about how the candidate would run a government, or do you think it's irrelevant?
Governor.
I think it is. You know, we were asked a question about that the other day, and I made the observation that while Senator Obama, President-elect Obama, was a senator, he really has more of an executive personality. And that Senator McCain, as a senator, had actually more of a legislative personality. I mean, I really do think that you have to know yourself well enough to know which personality you have. And the way in which Senator Obama organized his campaign, I think speaks well for his ability to be an effective president. He, first of all, surrounded himself with really good people. People who had experience in presidential campaigns and people, frankly, who had lost in presidential campaigns and who had learned from those experiences. And he gave them a very clear expectation of how he wanted the campaign to be run. First, it wasn't going to be about egos. It was going to be about winning the campaign, and there was going to be a clear, consistent, disciplined message, which I think in order to lead and govern effectively, you have to have. So I do think there is something to say about that. And to your point, those guys who got together in 2004, they said that in order for the Democrats to be successful, it had to be a governor who understood Midwestern values and who could relate to Catholics. I happen to have been a governor from the Midwest who was Catholic. So how far wrong were they? Yeah.
Right up here.
My name is Felicity Spector. I'm the American politics expert with British Television, Channel 4 News. I just wanted to ask about the transition and how best the incoming Obama administration can show themselves to be in charge without being physically in charge. I think I'm right in saying that the incoming Clinton administration frittered away a lot of the valuable time they could have used in this period between now and January. Is it about making appointments? Is it about making bold policy statements about where you want to go without seeming presumptuous? What's your opinion on what he should be doing?
Jennifer?
I think that the time of transition shows a lot. The way people come and go from jobs and situations shows a lot about who they are. And the same is certainly true of an administration. Today, Obama's historic meeting with Bush. I'm going to take a wild guess that they probably got along really well. That they probably learned a lot from each other, and that Obama probably heard what Bush was saying about how best to come in and take over the reins at a time that is much bigger than a political party taking over, but it's a time where any misguided steering could actually have a direct impact on the world economy and global alliances in terms of foreign policy. So I think that, really the challenge for the Obama administration is to do a few of the things we talked about: unify, retain, support, while showing leadership and confidence, but not overreaching. So it's a little bit of everything. Essentially, I think he doesn't want to get ahead of his skis on where he's going to go in terms of policy, because circumstances could change. And Bush, after a couple of years of not being the most active president, has actually been pretty active in this past year by necessity. So I think that, yes, Obama wants to let out the ideas about who he wants in his cabinet, see how the public and the media react to that, but not make any final decisions until he's absolutely certain. And I think he certainly does not want to expend any political capital on some of the things that Clinton did in the first 100 days. Gays in the military, huge mistake. A few other things. And that'll be easier to do this cycle because we are at a time where it's very obvious what the priorities need to be. And also because Obama came in with millions of small donors as opposed to, thousands of huge donors. So I think that he is not beholden.
Hundreds of bundlers.
Or hundreds of bundlers, another good point. He's not beholden in the way that his predecessors have been. And I think that actually gives him a lot of leeway. But political capital has to be retained for whether he goes the big bang approach or the smaller series in a row approach?
Alex?
It's all about the White House, not so much the cabinet secretaries. I think the lesson people got out of the Carter and Clinton transitions was lock your White House down as soon as possible, and that seems to be what the Obama team is doing. The second lesson from Obama seems to be look at his key appointments so far, and they tell you what he thinks the job is going to be. When you pick a Rahm Emanuel, it's because you want to make sure you can check your side of the aisle, keep them in check, and discipline them in Congress. You're not so much worried about the Republican side at this point. So it seems to me he's very well focused there. The other big decision that they'll have to make soon, and I would assume they already have, is the deficit versus the big bang reforms and growth. Is he going to be a president that alienates everybody by trying to address the serious problem of the deficit, the structural debt in America? Or is he going to try to grow his way out of that and also get his reforms? My guess is he's going to try to grow that. And so that leads to the next big decision, which out of the top 4 cabinet secretaries, how bipartisan do you get there? Do you keep a Gates, Justice, Treasury, State, and what am I missing? Justice, Treasury, State, and Defense. Keep a Gates. Does that leave you running room on the others to do enough to, again, get your program done? But he's done the biggest thing, which is move quickly on White House staff. That's the key point, I think.
Can I add just one quick point to that, which is that he also had a good visual of assembling an economic team which sent the message to the public that he is aware of the fact he's got to respond quickly and in a fairly comprehensive way to the economic crisis. So that was a reassuring message. Without necessarily having cabinet selections, he sent a reassuring message that he knows what job number 1 is.
All right, we're going to pick up the pace just a little bit. We have about 30 minutes left on these questions. We're going to go right up here.
Thank you. I had a question for Mr. Castellanos. You said 2 things that I thought I wanted to ask if you could synthesize. First, you said that it's a center-right country, and then you said that the candidate should have told people, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, that they should get a bigger paycheck. And I can't remember the last time I heard a Republican actually tell people in those words, you should get a bigger paycheck. That's generally something Democrats say. They wanted to raise the minimum wage to give people literally a bigger paycheck. They were opposed. So I'm wondering, first, if saying that it's a center-right country is sort of an old paradigm, and second, if saying that the Republican Party needs to shift to this new paradigm where they tell people, yes, you need a bigger paycheck, how are they going to get there? How does that fit in?
Well, the same debate rages everywhere, doesn't it, on all kinds of levels. For example, in foreign policy, do you help someone with aid or trade? Do you give them a bigger paycheck, or do you try to help them create the opportunity to earn lots of bigger paychecks? The Republican point of view on bigger paychecks would be raising the minimum wage is nice, but raising the opportunity for everyone to raise their own minimum wage is nicer. Have Republicans spoken as articulately and directly about earning a bigger paycheck as they should and talking to the middle class? No. And again, that's what I had hoped we'd find a candidate to do this election. The old paradigm of liberal versus conservative, you know, I think is still there in America. You know, this is still a country founded on an idea that people should have the opportunity to succeed and fail and grow. It's a dynamic system. And my fear now is that just at the point when we have to compete with the entire world, just when other nations are rising to our level, just when we're going to choose, are going to be frightened by the bungling of the economy that we've seen into an ossified system that prevents growth and a more dynamic prosperity. I think you can talk about new things without abandoning old things you believe in. As a matter of fact, I think when you look at the communications age, some of the old paradigm of distributed power, individual freedom, is still entirely appropriate for a new world. Old things work do old principles still work in a new world, in a communications age? I'd say Republicans have got to learn to think that way and talk that way.
Right here.
Hi, I'm Kelly Blake. I'm a fourth-year doctoral student at the School of Public Health, and I'm wondering if the whole panel would be willing to indulge us in some cabinet predictions, and specifically maybe Governor Vilsack, you would be willing to say whether there's truth to the rumor that you'll be tapped to head up agriculture.
Let me just, I'll try to answer your question this way. I honestly believe that what I know about the transition process is that they're going to be it's going to be an extraordinary group of people that the president-elect is going to assemble. What's happening now, all this speculation, has virtually no basis in reality. This is a very tight-lipped, very close-knit decision-making process, which has been extraordinarily disciplined again, which it needs to be. I think Alex is right. The focus has been on getting the White House team in place because they realize that's the heart and soul of the operation. They have asked the transition team to put together a list of individuals who could be possible cabinet secretaries, as well as memos that outline what ought to happen in the first 100 days, in the first year, in the 4 years. So speculation about names is just that. It's fun, but it's just that. I will tell you, I am absolutely confident of two things. One, the people will be extraordinarily well qualified, and two, it will be a bipartisan cabinet.
I say you should go to crowdsourcethecabinet.com and site we launched today, and just and put together your own your own cabinet, and make the case to the president-elect as to why you think why you think Governor Vilsack should be the Secretary of Agriculture.
I think that if they haven't tapped Governor Vilsack, they really ought to, because we've been hearing about Iowa's economy a little bit lately, and I think it actually has performed so well compared to the nationwide economy that I would like to see him in there. But in terms of other positions, I think I've emailed some economist friends, and I think that while Summers is there, there are also Larry Summers. There are also some other names. Yeah, I think so. Tom Gitlin and some other people that we probably haven't even heard as much about that are considered extremely qualified. And I do think that with Colin Powell's early endorsement of Obama before the vote was held, that it would be probably quite likely that they would reach out to him as a leader who supported Obama before the vote was taken. Other than that, I have no real information on it.
If it were a Republican administration, but I don't know that. I know it won't include Joe the plumber. That's about
Perfect. Right over here.
Yeah, this question's for probably for Mr. Purcell, Governor Vilsack, and Nico a little bit. In terms, well, that 10 million person list, there's been lists that big before. It's just the media never paid attention. Voter Activation Network in 2004 and America Coming Together, we compiled easily 10 million contacts with voters. Thing is, we never leveraged it after. So my question is, in terms of, great, we've got this big list, what's a use case? How do you actually stimulate civic engagement? What does he do? What's that first email that he sends out? And how do you guys see this in terms of maybe broadening the field for more participatory politics in those terms? I mean, what would you have done as mayor if you had this list, or you, sir, as governor, or, Nika, what would you have built to help them use the list is kind of the question.
Let me start very quickly because you asked. The hardest thing in elective office, whether you're a mayor or a governor, and I believe a president, the hardest thing is talking to everybody at the same time at a moment when they can listen. It's not that they're always going to agree or that they're always going to believe you, but the need to, at least at one moment in time, share where you think we are, and then be in a place to at least suggest where you think we should go is the single hardest thing you do as a leader. And the opportunities are few, and frankly, when they're missed, it's very hard ever to get back to that place again. And without that, it is hard to govern, it is very hard to build consensus, and it has an effect that lasts beyond the particular issue. So, when you have the ability to actually communicate with huge numbers of people in a way that they will receive it, in a way that they are open to, in a way that doesn't depend on whether they're awake or watching the screen or involved at that moment, but will be waiting for them. That is an incredible transformation of the ability of any human being to communicate with the rest of the world. And I think it's correctly perceived that it's transformative, not just of campaigns, but perhaps of governing as well. And so, Governor Vilsack, this is something we never had before. And Nico, you may also want to pick up there.
I would say that initially, the president-elect has a very difficult question to ask his political advisors, which is, does he use this list in the runoff election in Georgia to generate support for that runoff? That's a very difficult question to answer. If you're trying to be bipartisan, it's pretty tough if the first thing you do with a list of 10 million is to say, folks down in Georgia could use your help. On the other hand, if you're trying to get a Senate that can be more cooperative, that seat might be pretty critical. So that's the first thing. The second thing, one of the things that struck me about the Obama campaign was its capacity to develop a sense of relationship between those individuals and the candidate. They really felt vested in this campaign, more than I had seen other than perhaps Howard Dean's initial efforts. And I think so the tool needs to be used in a way that continues to further that relationship and strengthen that relationship. So you give people a chance to weigh in on cabinet selections, or not that you're going to be governed by that, but you just don't know what kind of great idea might pop out of asking and inviting people to have input. So I think the key there is to continue that, strengthening that relationship, because you're going to need it. You know, right now, and I'll finish with this, the president-elect has the benefit because he has yet to govern and he has yet to make a set of decisions. So all of us sort of gave him the benefit of the doubt. We had this image, each of us have this image of a perfect president, and because he hasn't made any decisions yet, we all sort of infused him with that sense of what we thought a perfect president was going to be. As he starts making decisions, some of us are not going to be happy with those decisions. It's just the nature of leadership. So if you have a relationship with 10 million people or 20 million people, that can get you through some stormy times. And there's no question in a 4-year administration there are going to be some stormy times.
I mean, you're right, it's not, in terms of a list size, 10 million, especially in the corporate world, not that much, right? But I think actually, and even I believe the RNC had a 7 million person online list in 2004. But in terms of 3 million donors, and in terms of the amount of data they've amassed, and they really have a relationship with these people, really understand in really intimate ways how to activate and engage them. I think it's I don't think any president's had quite a resource like that going into the White House. I think, Governor Vilsack is absolutely right. I hadn't even thought about it. That's a really critical question about Georgia. But I think there's a lot of interesting things that could happen. I think you could use it as a way to get people to re-engage in their local communities. You could use it as a way to, who wants to tackle issues of energy and the economy. Lots of ways you could use it, both to generate ideas, but also to really get to the root of, to really get into people's communities.
A prediction? One way to get along with Republicans is to have fewer of them. And so I'd be shocked if they didn't mobilize everybody in the world to go down to Georgia. Win first, litigate later. Secondly, if you go to that Barack Obama's website, right at the top, first thing you always saw throughout the campaign was, I'm not asking you to have faith that I can change Washington. I'm asking you to have faith that you can. I'd be stunned if they didn't have this ongoing dialogue with folks when legislation comes up and say, And these are people who are highly motivated folks who are willing to go to other states and campaigns. But I think the really interesting question is the one Nico raised, which is next time there's a problem, is the first thought of an Obama administration to solve it the old way. Send some more money into Washington, they'll build a factory, and the factory will crank out solution and send it around. Or does he go out to his base, to America, and say, there's poverty here, there's pain here, there's a need over there, let's go together. That would be an interesting, thinking about that 20, 25 years from now. I'd love to see where something like that start and where it could go.
I mean, I think I think it would be astonishing if he used his list in some way to, discuss and engage the American people on policy issues. Not just this, if he used WhiteHouse.gov for that. If, Dick Cheney makes his energy policy behind closed doors with energy lobbyists, Barack Obama makes his energy policy on the internet, kind of open, where everybody can see what's going on and maybe participate in some way with their ideas. I mean, I'm a big believer in, American innovation and entrepreneurship, and I think that that's kind of a big part of in some ways, the ethos of the Obama change.
Up here.
My name's Tom Gill. I'm a second-year student in the Master of Public Policy program here. I was most recently a deputy field organizer for the Obama campaign for 2 weeks leading up to the election, in charge of the get out to vote in an area of Ohio there. My question is this: one of the more exciting components of it for me to be a part of it was the fact that I was 25 and I was the second oldest paid staffer in the office. And it was really exciting for me to be with so many young people that were really excited about government. And a lot of people that have made my job search actually a lot harder because so many people now want to work for government, and especially for this administration. Question is gut instinct. The expectations are really high. What do you think this generation that's been a part of this campaign 4 years, 8 years, 20 years from now is going to reflect upon in these past few months? Do you think we're going to be able to harness that energy and keep it going to the sense that we return to a time when, yeah, it is cool to work for government and we want to work for government and our most talented people want to be a part of the political process?
It's interesting because, as many of you know, the Institute of Politics has been polling around youth vote and youth attitudes now for quite a few years, actually, longer than almost anybody. And all of the indications were up to this election that, in fact, there was a change, a transformation among the youth voters. And I think you heard Jennifer a moment ago give some quick statistics about the youth vote. This was a very different youth vote result overall. 38 points perhaps, according to exit polls, but between 30 and 38 points divided young people in their positions on these two candidates. And in fact, Barack Obama was a winner of a larger percentage of youth vote than, to our knowledge, anyone has ever obtained before. Much closer, 5 points, 4 points, or less than 1 point in the case of the last 3 elections. So the real question then was that a transformation not just of the vote at a particular time, but was a generation transformed? Is this just one moment in an electoral cycle? Or in fact, are these young people now going to be young people who vote, engage, participate, and perhaps vote in the same way year after year, election after election? It's a very different result for you to know from those of us who were in the first group to actually vote after 18-year-olds were given the right to vote. I happen to be one of those people. We got the right to vote, and we went to the polls in 1972 and we voted, and Richard Nixon was elected President of the United States. It was a very different time. So the question is, looking forward, is it one cycle or is it a nation transformed? Governor Vilsack.
I don't know that anybody can answer that question today. I think it has a lot to do with the next couple of years and whether or not there's going to be real action on the nation's problems, and whether or not the President-elect is able to summon all of us to serve our country in some form, in some fashion. I happen to be confident that he can do that, but if for some reason it doesn't happen, I don't think that this is necessarily an indication of a movement. This is the first step, and it's going to take a lot of hard work and a lot of time and a lot of energy, and there are going to be a lot of disappointments along the way. It is much similar to the, at least from my perspective, the sort of the legacy of my generation, I believe it was and is an expansion of civil rights. And I think it took us 40 years to get from Martin Luther King's speech to electing an African-American president. So you better be in it for the long haul.
Alex, then Jennifer.
I think there's some permanent changes and some that time will deal with. Why is the youth vote different? Well, it's because it's young. I know it's tautology, but what does that mean? Well, they haven't lived a lot. That's the good news. The good news is that that's why you're seeing, I think, such an impatience with, lack of authenticity in politics or intolerance for bull. When you have a generation that gets its news from the Daily Show, it's telling you that, look, that distance that you guys thought you had running government is gone now. We see you wherever you go, whatever you do. We want immediacy and transparency, and I think that's a gift this generation is bringing to the process and will obtain. But this generation will get older, and I think there's a lot of parenting in life and in politics. And one of the things you learn as a parent is the easy thing to do is to help your child cross the street. The harder thing to do is to teach your child to cross the street. And as you age, the goals remain the same, but your willingness to let the child at some point go alone and to build a system that'll operate without you, that does not gratify the immediate youthful ego of immediate results, but instead serves a purpose once you're gone. We're in a very youth-dominated cycle now. This will age. Beware of the tyranny. Will this generation be disappointed at some point that it's good intentions? It's not enough just to wish for sunshine and even to act for it. That you have to actually give. I think in time it'll mature. So I wouldn't sell this generation short in saying that what's going to happen if we don't get everything we want right away. I think change begins here, but it's just the beginning.
Was the turnout up, though? Do we know? Well, it was up, but not by as much as they predicted. And it was up, the youth vote went 3-1 for Obama, but the actual number of young voters who turned out was lower than anticipated. Higher than ever before, but lower than speculated. An interesting thing, too, is the just older than young, the 30 to 64-year-old voter who actually went decisively for Obama. And those are people who actually would be affected by the economic changes in tax structure that was, being debated in the final days of the campaign. The only vote that went decisively for McCain was the 60-plus voter. And I think what's interesting about that is, just a quick anecdote. I think the numbers are interesting to reflect about, but more interesting are the people. I mean, Tom, you were kind enough to come to my study group last week and share the stories about working as a field organizer in Ohio. That was transfixing for those of us who are old in the room because we didn't get that experience, because we didn't take that experience. We didn't do it. I'm a humble Generation Xer who watched this generation trump us handily in their activity and effort in this campaign. And God bless you, because if you hadn't done it, I don't know who would have done it, because my generation took a very embarrassing pass on it, which isn't to say that we're all, not ticking. We are. I think what's happened is, after a long time of inactivity, which I could give a million different reasons to, we see now a generation taking a leadership role. They could relate to Obama. He's 47 years old. Now I think you're going to see these 30-plus people, too, follow the lead of Obama at 47, younger people flanking them who are active and inspiring and saying, yeah, I better get involved, too. Gee, I better run for office, too, even if I have 2 little kids. I better find a way to make this work and do it. And the other thing I'll just share with you quickly is that little kids tell you everything you need to know. my 8-year-old was doing a little play in her classroom with another little girl, and the teacher found them. They'd written it all out on the computer when they got their computer time. One was Obama, one was McCain, and I won't say which one was who. The one who was McCain said, "I'm John McCain, and I want to keep us at war, and I approve this message." And the other one said, "I'm Barack Obama, and I'm for happiness. Kids will vote for me. I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message." So, out of the mouths of babes, right?
Well, on that happy note, let me tell you, unfortunately, that we've run out of time for any further questions. The other bit of good news for those of you that were listening and didn't agree with what might have been said is that actually at this point in history, no one actually knows for sure what happened. All of the predictions and everything that was said here, there is no way in the world. So if you disagreed with them, there's at least as good a chance as any others that you may turn out to be absolutely right. Unfortunately, we won't know for about 10, perhaps 20 years. In Harvard time, that's a very short period of time. And the rest of the world know this for sure. I believe, as the moderator and maybe as the director of the Institute, campaigns have been transformed forever. They'll never be the same again. That I think we're sure about. And I believe, at least, that the country will never be the same again either. Thank you all very, very much for joining us here tonight.
4 to 5:30 weekdays, right here. Study groups.
This is a group that knows that, and I know Echo ditto. You all have a good night. Thank you very much.